This video covers concepts related to configuring an elapsed time employee type. Elapsed time employees capture their labour hours by entering the duration of time spent on an activity rather than by entering the start and end times they spend on the activity. To configure the employee type, select the employee type from the administrator homepage. The General tab defines whether attendance and labour will be captured via elapsed time or clock time. Some employee type parameters are not relevant for elapsed time employees. These include the default, absence code, and stop-only transactions. Additionally, the parameters on the punch parameter and work set tabs are not applicable to employees in elapsed time data capture employee types. To create an elapsed time data capture employee type, set the elapsed time data capture parameter to yes. This will then activate the elapsed time configuration fields. There are two process methods. These are daily and weekly. The daily method requires the employee to submit and the supervisor to approve and process hours on a daily basis. The weekly method only requires the employee to submit and the supervisor to approve and process on a weekly basis. Manual hours configuration is used primarily with daily elapsed time processing. When the parameter is set to no, the application will apply the overtime method specified on the employee's shift to the hours entered in the timesheets. When it's set to yes, the operator manually enters the labour type when entering hours. The standard manual hours types used are R, O, and D for regular, overtime, and double time. The allow alternate hours type parameter also activates. This allows a fourth code A. The A hours type is most frequently used to account for hours that go beyond the scheduled work week but are not eligible for overtime. Elapsed employees are required to sign their hours when they are submitted. Set the submit and sign off separately parameter to yes to require the employee to sign the hours in a separate action when submitting the hours. Otherwise, the signature is taken as a default when they submit their hours. The collect attendance hours parameter allows elapsed employees to enter attendance transactions. By default, an elapsed employee is only responsible for entering the labour. Payroll hours will be equal to the labour hours entered. If this parameter is set, payroll hours are still derived from the sum of the labour hours entered, but this feature also allows tracking of the employee's presence via their in and out status. Collecting attendance hours is more conducive to the daily elapsed employee type and is not recommended for weekly employee types. By default, elapsed attendance hours are independent of elapsed labour hours. They are not required to match. You can set require attendance hours match labour hours to process to yes to flag the user when labour and attendance do not match. When this parameter is set to yes, the user will receive an exception visual cue when labour and attendance hours do not match. You can also enter a value in the allowed variance to set a threshold within which labour or attendance will be adjusted to eliminate any variances. The allowed variance is stated in percentage points. A 10% allowed variance means that the attendance variance on 10 hours of labour is plus or minus 1 hour. If attendance hours exceed the labour hours by less than 1 hour, the transaction time on the clock out will be adjusted so that the attendance hours match the labour hours. If attendance hours are less than 1 hour less than the labour hours, the last reported labour record will be reduced to make the attendance and labour hours match. If the variance is greater than 1 hour in either direction, the hours will display in an exception status until the variance is eliminated by editing either the labour records or the attendance records. To submit the number of hours scheduled in a shift week, set Submit 40 work week to payroll to yes. When set to yes, no labour needs to be entered. When hours are processed, the application will then divide the number of scheduled hours in the shift week by the number of work days in the shift week and create payroll records for each work day. The sum of the payroll detail records will then equal the number of hours scheduled for the week. Elapsed employees using this configuration may enter and post labour hours to ERP, but regardless of the number of labour hours entered, the number of hours created in payroll will be limited to the number of hours scheduled for the shift week. This feature is applicable to the weekly process method. It is also applicable to the daily method when attendance hours are not collected.